thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We are here to talk about adapting to the changing digital landscape in higher education. I'm Edith, and I'm going to be, I guess, your guide today through this journey. So, kick us off a little bit. We're running this webinar as we've recently published a report called Clearing 2025, a high stakes digital battleground for UK university, which highlights the findings from our research into the digital experience of 20 UK universities during clearing. And then a few weeks ago, we also ran a roundtable with some of your peers to discuss these findings and their experiences during clearing when it came to the digital experience and the obstacles they're facing in creating experience that is student-centric. So today we want to share some of what we've learned with you and by answering the questions that you've submitted to us. And today isn't just about Invika. We also have Lars from Acquia on the call with us. Lars brings 15 years of experience in the accessibility industry, as well as personal insights as a blind screen reader user to this discussion. He'll also be able to talk much more eloquently than I can about Acquia's web governance tool, which we use as part of our research for the report to assess the accessibility compliance of the websites we research. It provided some really detailed analysis of where a site was nailing accessibility and where it still needs some work. So it was an incredibly useful tool for us for that research. So how today's going to run is that I'm going to hand the floor over to your presenters. They'll introduce themselves. Christoph will give a quick overview of some of the insights from the report, and then we're going to dive into your questions and try and get through as many of them as possible. A lot of what we learned from both the research and the roundtable will be surfaced in those answers. So we're going to keep that intro really light to give as much time to those as possible. If you didn't submit a question as part of your registration, you can still use the Q&A or chat function to submit one, and we'll see if we can squeeze it in. But for now, I'm going to mute my mic and hand it over to the experts. Christoph, do you want to start?
Thanks, Iris. So hi, everybody. My name is Christoph Bhattacharya. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Invika. I'll hand over to you, Connie.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Connie. I'm an experienced designer and accessibility specialist at Invika. Very excited to be here and talk about accessibility in higher education. I'll pass on to Jamie.
Hello everyone, lovely to meet you. I'm Jamie Stantonian. I'm the head of research and experience. And I've worked in all sorts of industries in the past, conducted research in higher ed, retail, hospitality, cultural heritage, all sorts of stuff. So looked at lots of digital services and lots of different industries over the years.
Cool. Great. So I just want to
Should I say something also?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Lars. Apologies.
And I suppose you still can't see me.
No, unfortunately.
Okay, so I'm sorry for that, everyone. First of all, we don't know why. On mine, camera says on, but it's not the case. Anyway, my name is Lars. I'm an accessibility expert in the Acquia web governance team. And in short, the web governance platform is a software tool where we help our customers to scan for things like accessibility and privacy and policies you can set up for your website, so you can monitor these things over time. Also, I'm a blind screen reader user, so I'm coming with, you can say, both a lot of experience from the accessibility world on the professional side, but also experience from the other end of accessibility, you can say, from personal day-to-day experiences with good or bad accessibility in my own life. So yeah, thanks for inviting me in here today.
Pleasure to have you, Lars. Thanks for joining.
One more thing I want to add. I'm located in Denmark, so I may not have a whole lot of experience with the university system in the UK, but since accessibility is an aspect of both the report and the roundtable you've done earlier, I'm happy to be here to talk about these accessibility perspectives.
Amazing. Thanks, Lars. So a bit of background on how we approached this research. So we looked at 20 UK universities during their real peak period of clearing, and our methodology involved 5 key areas. So to quickly run through them, we looked at the clarity of clearing information to ensure that visitors to the website could really find and participate in the clearing process in an efficient manner. We looked at the website experience to look at how intuitive that experience was, everything from navigation to understandability of the information being presented. We then looked at course discoverability. So is the information on the website actually useful? Is it easy to find and beyond? The 4th area was supporting students during that very sort of tense period around decision making and supporting them, providing content beyond academics at institutions, so that sort of holistic experience on university campus. And then finally, we looked at performance and compliance, so aspects such as accessibility, SEO, and website sustainability. So I wanted to give you a quick overview of some of the outcomes from our research. So to start off with, I think overall what we did notice was there wasn't that much variance when we came to look at the overall performance of the website. There's only about an 18% variance between the lowest and the top scoring universities. And what really stood out was most of the institutions were really aiming for adequacy versus being distinct. And we got the sense that digital was being treated as a hygiene factor rather than as a key differentiation. And in looking at all of that, we noticed 2 key quick wins. For example, just simply providing clickable, clear phone numbers for mobile users where they can tap to call was something that many institutions missed. For those of you who do scroll around websites a lot on your phone screen, you know how frustrating it is when you tap on something and it doesn't actually respond in the way you intend it to. And having that simple link to launch your phone app so you can just start the call is a massive winner. And also just direct links to course pages that open up and provide that immediacy and access to information was missed by quite a few institutions. And then moving on, looking at the common areas of challenge in navigation, we did find that a number of things really stood out. So some of the websites we looked at really showed poor structure and information architecture. So, not signposting correctly, not providing easy navigation modalities, not the breadcrumb being ineffective on the site navigation. Search was also another area where a number of websites really, some of them performed well, and some of them had areas of improvement. So, I think we can all connect with that frustration we feel when we go onto a website, not just university website, but any website out there that has search, and you search for something and it simply doesn't yield the result you were looking for. And then finally, a lot of the university websites had massive amounts of information. And so we find that, on average, 60% had comprehensive course finder tools, about 40% offered seamless search. Course pages were generally information rich, which we found was a good thing, but often that sort of copy heavy focus made the content really hard to navigate in itself. And then finally, on the third aspect, we looked at sort of common areas around accessibility. Now, this is where Acquia's web governance tool really came into its own. We used this tool in combination with manual accessibility assessments, and a couple of areas stood out. Most institutions were doing a good job in accessibility, but it really felt like compliance, but not really providing any convenience or an optimal experience. And we'll unpack that a bit later on during this webinar. There was also a lack of understanding of how assistive technology is really used, and Lars will definitely be able to talk to that. And then the final thing was sort of a lack in consistency and governance. So as an example, the homepage might have been really optimized for accessibility, but we felt that governance throughout the whole of the website, so those sub pages, those subject and course pages, the department sections, didn't necessarily reflect a consistency in accessibility. So we got a 65% average accessibility compliance score overall. And some of the common areas where we felt improvements could be made was around things like keyboard navigation, how tabs and accordions manifest and present themselves to screen readers, for example, how carousels and sliders do or don't make it easier or harder for navigating using assistive technology, the focus states not being consistent, breadcrumbs being quite ad hoc or broken as you navigate through deep navigation structures, and also quite often the misuse and abuse of the alt text tag. And there's more to be said about that later on in this presentation. So yeah, that's a high-level overview of some of the key findings from our research. Iris, back to you.
Let me just turn back everything back on. Great, thank you so much, Christoph. I'm going to stop sharing so we can focus on the people. And staying with the accessibility topic to kick off the questions. From the roundtable discussion, as well as the benchmark findings, what are some of the low-hanging fruit changes that UK universities could implement right now to dramatically enhance accessibility and user engagement on their websites? And are there any that you would recommend for teams with a limited team capacity or budget? I think Jamie, Christoph, and Connie, let's get into that one.
I would say in terms of user engagement, there's no one single sort of one weird trick that we can use. It would depend on circumstance to circumstance. Making the content easily readable by AI, by ChatGPT and whatnot, that's definitely something that you should be thinking about. I would say definitely making it not. We had another question about retail websites. I'm not going to learn about retail websites. I would say to make it less like retail websites because of the purchase journey, which may be over years, and kind of those kind of hard sell tactics that you see on retail websites are just not going to be conducive to the types of long-term engagements that you want to see on a university website. You know, young folk in that situation, you know, young people, their body's changing, their minds are changing. It's like a big stressful decision. It's like, what am I going to do with my entire life? And just anything we can do to alleviate that stress. So as Christoph mentioned, content. A lot of university websites are full of content, often written by academics. Good content, probably really interesting, but increasingly the trends are people don't read as much, and that's a bigger trend overall. But you see that all the time in user research, and they're very impatient if they don't find what they're looking for immediately. So just nice, clear, succinct content. On a course page, that can be difficult because it's a very complex, quote unquote product. But just being really thinking long and hard about the precise kind of pieces of information and how they're articulated. What else? Testimonials and video content, definitely something to think about, especially with international students. They want to see kind of hard evidence, or at least anecdotal evidence that, you know, someone from my background has went to this course, they're achieving success now, and video content is by far the most preferred way of doing this. And this is a big challenge, right? There's a lot of countries, there's a lot of courses. It's like a big ask, but it is definitely something that we've seen a demand for. What else? Reassurance around safety was another thing we've seen in the past. We've seen concern amongst one focus group that we saw of like what's the crime like in this city, and that kind of surprised us a little bit to begin with, but it must be a part of the decision-making process. First time moving away from home. What else? I think that'll be for me for now. Gustavo, pass over to you.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of the other things that stood out for me was, the university shouldn't really shy away from prominently signposting clearing in the lead up to and during that sort of peak flow crush moment of clearing. I think sometimes the way I phrase it is, sort of institutional ego sometimes, prevents that sort of more openness in advertising the clearing process. And I think that's a level of frustration. It's friction that's created where a student's going through quite an intense period where they need to get to information really quickly and make those decisions rapidly. Just touching on a topic that Jamie mentioned a few moments ago around chatbots and AI search engines. We're all pretty much used to the Google AI overview that you see when you search for things, but it also goes beyond that. I think it's safe to say most students, as well as mums and dads and parents and adults in general, are all using forms of large language models and AI, such as ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and so on. And there is a particular technique to improving how you show up in these generative engines. And it's not just about search engine optimization and the content on your page, but it's also about what's behind the scenes, hidden away from the visitor of your website. So things like some of the underlying tagging in the content of your website. There are special meta tags and schema markup that can be implemented to actually signpost and show the structure of your website more clearly to generative engines such as ChatGPT or Google Search Overview, AI engines and beyond. So I think there's a lot that can be done, and those are real quick wins. We've seen that ourselves working with some of our friends in the higher education sector, and if you can get that right, you can really make some impactful changes that can happen within days rather than weeks or months. Connie, anything from you?
Yes, I was about to say. And in terms of accessibility, I think about it, of course, in terms of compliance. So I'd say first things first, like low-hanging fruit, alt text. It either needs to add meaning to screen reader users who are using it, or it should be empty alt text. So shouldn't present as noise. And then things like keyboard navigation, that is very important. And on course pages, especially that have side panels, it needs to be implemented in a logical way. But I think for me, compliance is not the most exciting way to think about accessibility. So I always like to focus on the experience. And I feel that students with disabilities or accessibility needs might have concerns about their safety on campus, as it was mentioned previously, even for users and students without disabilities. Safety on campus, maybe it's the first time they are leaving home. Their parents might be anxious about this. Potentially, it's the first time they need to organize and collect paperwork for getting help and accommodating their needs at the university. So it can be quite stressful. And I think it's important to reassure them as best we can with perhaps video content from students who have disabilities, sharing their experience about life at university, how they will feel a sense of belonging. And as a bare minimum, I would say a checklist would be very useful, listing out all the steps that they would need to take to make all those arrangements that are very important to them and organize as smoothly as possible their university experience and applying for a course and things like that. Lars, I don't know if you would like to add anything to those.
Yeah, they are good things, but something I also find is important to remember here. I often see a tendency when we start talking about accessibility and people with disabilities or accessibility needs is that often people forget that these people have the same things they want to do on your website. There can be areas of special interest if you are applying as a student with a disability. But in general, the contact points or the user journeys or calls to actions that would be relevant for you as a student with a disability, you're coming to the website for the same things as everyone else. And it's a little bit funny how often people get to focus more about other areas and tend to forget these people are actually coming to our website for the same reasons as others that they need to apply for the course or whatever it is. So I still think it's very important also to have the focus on what are our main user flows, user journeys here, and just make sure they are actually accessible if you come with a keyboard as a keyboard user, a screen reader user, or whatever it may be.
Good point, Lars. And I was going to say also, I think research is so important. Actually talking to real students or to staff around how websites are being used, and in terms of accessibility. I mean, I can speak as a dad of a teenager at the moment who is going to University Open Days. And it's amazing watching him use the tools that he uses. So, for example, with websites that have a lot of video content or information-dense content, he's now feeding those URLs and the video captions that are available into tools like Google Notebook LM, which will just summarize the video for him. So rather than watching all of the videos from start to end, he'll just get the AI in Google Notebook LM to fully summarize all of the content and bring it together for him, as well as really content dense course pages. He'll just get summaries of them really quickly. So there's some of these elements as well to watch out for.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier about being succinct, because we do see this trend now of people use AI to create content. At the other end, people use AI to summarize content, but really you should just be saying things succinctly and with clarity to begin with. And sort of get around some of that. But I've seen some of the stuff that Christoph's talked about. I've watched some demo, and it's pretty interesting, and it's definitely the way of things to come. I maybe a comment on alt tags and images and appropriate use thereof. Would be interested to get some of Lars's thoughts on this. I have the view of alt tags. It should not just be purely functional and descriptive, like woman sits next to laptop, but something a bit more poetic to sort of articulate the essence of what that picture is saying, without being overly verbose, I suppose. What's your views on that, Lars? Do you find that useful or not really?
Okay, so now we're getting into something which is a little bit about personal preference. But in my point of view, actually, the majority of images on websites, they are more or less decorative, I would say, meaning actually we want to have some code on them which makes it possible for the screen reader to just skip the image. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, are we conveying some kind of important information in this image? And if the answer is yes, then obviously you need to give it a text alternative describing what's going on, or even better, what is the function of this image. But also I must say, in my experience, in a lot of organizations, there's a lot of energy is spent to come up with a text alternative for a lot of images where I would say they are to a big extent decorative and could actually just be ignored by screen readers. Of course, it's always a little bit about there's some kind of editorial judgment in this. Sometimes, let's say you have some kind of social picture from some social situation on the campus or something. There may be some aspect of conveying the atmosphere in the place among the students. Then it can be very relevant to get that communicated through the alt text. But to me, it's also important not just to completely blindly add text alternatives to every single image. Some of them are actually just decorative.
Yeah, so showing restraint really, just adding those descriptions really when it's only communicating something really meaningful. Costa, have you had something you would say about alt tags earlier?
Well, I was going to say, I think Lars, your point really brings me back to governance. And there are so many amazing CMS developments at the moment. So content management systems that are used to maintain content on university websites. Many of them have AI features built into them now, where you can automatically generate the alt tags. But that's a challenge in itself, because to Lars's point, an AI doesn't know the context necessarily between a decorative image versus a functional image that actually has a purpose on the website and is conveying meaning. So whilst your CMS might be able to chomp through 100% of all of the images on your website and give them alt text, it's then the governance layer on top of that where real people, real editors come in and actually look at the context of that tagging and decide, should that be present, or should it be hidden, or an option to just skip over, to the next provided.
Yeah, and if I may add a little bit to that, I mean, it is, you have the chance now, or the option now, to just quickly get generated these text alternatives for the 100 images on your website very quickly without thinking about it. But if you do that, and then let's say it's actually only 2 or 3 or 5 of the images that convey some real information that I should know about, then it just means that you have 95 images on your website that it will take me time to get past these images just saying lady in a blue shirt, but maybe that's not giving me any real information, but it will just take me extra time to get through the page with my screen reader, reading all of that.
Makes a lot of sense.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, Connie, in your review of the university websites, what were some of the most common accessibility issues that you saw across them, and what's the best way to address this? And then just to tack on at the end there, how often should accessibility be reviewed?
Okay. I'll start with the common issues that I tend to find not just on university websites, but typically are some common friction points that come up when I'm looking at websites from an accessibility point of view. And first one is the keyboard navigation that I mentioned earlier, when it comes to side panels or even main navigation not following a logical order. So I'm opening, let's say, expanding on an accordion or a menu item, a category on the navigation, and then I have to go through all the other main categories before I'm able to navigate to that open like sub menu. I've seen the side panels on course pages, again, selecting a different item on the side panel, but then having to go through all the different items on that side panel before I'm able to access that information. Tabs can present some difficulties for the same reason. Carousels can cause problems because often they're not announced appropriately to screen reader users, so they don't understand how many slides there might be, what exactly is the content of its slide, or that there are arrows that they can tab to move and navigate that content. And then also breadcrumbs. They are often not announced as such, but they are announced as links. And I think that is particularly relevant to university websites because they tend to have to be very rich in terms of content, and the hierarchy is important, and people like being able to orient themselves when they are on a page. So typically, from what I've seen, breadcrumbs just are announced as links. But the best way to do that is to announce that there's a list of X number of breadcrumbs, so then users can understand, okay, that's the hierarchy of the content that I'm reading. Alt text was also mentioned, and I'd say a particular favorite or opposite of favorite for me is when adjacent links, particularly in cards, that are sending users to the same destination on a page, they are announced separately. So for example, if there is an image, they would announce an image link with the same title, the title, which is again the same, and the content sometimes, or the CTA, the call to action button, it will have the same copy. So it's just creating a lot of noise for screen reader users. So yeah, that's I'd say the most common issues that I'm not seeing on websites. And in terms of the best tips like for addressing those issues and making an accessible website, I suppose, I think it really, from our experience at Invika as well, like addressing those things internally, I'd say, I think it lies really like in good communication between teams, so the engineering team and the designers. And at Invika, we did a workshop where we had to kind of map out exactly what each team is expecting, like the other team to do, who owns what. And we did notice that sometimes engineers might think that designers need to be proactive or own something that like around accessibility, whereas designers think the opposite, that engineers need to own something. I'd say for keyboard navigation, this is particularly relevant because I personally hadn't realized how laborious it can be to understand and like implement, but also understand the order of the navigation for engineers. And sometimes they have to connect the dots themselves, but it's ideally important to provide guidance. The way we often do it is by having a page on the design system that lists out different ways that they need to approach navigation and other accessibility issues and components. But yeah, I would say the foundation is good communication between teams, and then everything else will follow. That's my impression. And to answer the other question about accessibility reviews, so I would say having that foundation, knowing who is owing what, and also having mapped out the digital estate, it's then important to do some automated testing. Begin with that, capture the key issues, and then manual testing, I suppose, of the key pages, because the problems that will appear on those will probably be on most pages on the website. So I'd say for practical reasons, maybe focus on some key important flows. And the next step, obviously, after having identified all the problems, is to go ahead, fix them, and then test again, and potentially retest every about 6 months, I would say, unless there is a major update. So I would say more frequently or after the update, and dependent on how frequently the content on the website is updated, the testing needs to be, as frequent. But I also advocate for testing with user with accessibility needs. So I think that's also an important thing to do, because they know best and they will give the best insights. So yeah, with this, I'll pass it on to Lars.
Yeah, thank you. I believe it's always good to find and fix your accessibility issues as early as possible. It's never fun for anyone to go back and fix 1 or 2 year old issues. But then in reality, to get to that situation, I think it can be healthy to have that awareness about, is this content or is this the structure or the template of the system, you can say. If we are looking at content, for example, you most likely you will find new content on your website on a daily or weekly basis. So I think it's good to have that ability to distinguish, is this content, so we can look at the content early on when it first appears on your website. And then on the other side, these more, you can say, the structure of your website, the components and templates that your website is built from, most likely they are not changing every day. So I'd say these things, I mean, like the main structure of your website, the global menu, the components you use to create contact forms, these things you definitely need or want to check these things. ideally before your website goes live in the first place, but otherwise, I mean, just when you can do it, and definitely also, as we hear, before any major update are done to these items. But so in my perspective, these things doesn't have to happen all of the time, but at least it has to happen at some point, and it has to happen whenever some major updates happens. But then for your content, you want to monitor it a bit more closely, also depending a little bit on where you are in your organization. In our platform, we have the ability, for example, to do a quick scan. So immediately, if you are an author publishing a new article on your page on the website, you can actually ask for a scan at the moment you publish it and get the immediate feedback at that point. And I think that's really good. And then if you are more in a role where you are monitoring the overall picture of it, we send these weekly reports, so you can see in case you have many people who can actually publish on your website, and then you can go and talk to all of them at the same time, but then you can get these weekly reports and see if things are moving the right direction or not. And then also we do have these capabilities to filter on, is this actually a content thing, or is it more a front-end development, or is it a UX design thing? So I would say the answer depends a little bit on the role we're talking about. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Connie and Lars. And just so you talked about the quick scan and the weekly reports, and this is from Acquire's, obviously the web governance tool.
Yeah.
How else can that tool kind of support the accessibility reviews of websites for universities and all organizations?
A strong thing is that we can show you the picture of where do you have things where you can describe it in a way where one code fix actually affects a lot of sites on your website. That could be if you have, let's say, an accessibility error in your main menu, for example, and it will flag that would usually just be a single code fix, but that would affect the accessibility across your entire website, obviously, because the menu is found on all of these pages. So that's a strong thing to be able to distinguish between, is this just like a small single instance fix, or are we actually fixing something that has a big impact across the site? Then I also want to add to it, in many cases, people tend to think about the automated checks as must-haves, and the assisted checks as more nice to have. And I would say in pretty much all accessibility tools, you have this, you have some automated checks where the machine can just determine by itself, yes or no, this is a failure. And then most tools, they have what in our platform we call it assisted check. We need some input, some human input to understand, is this actually a true error? And I think it's really important not to see these manual or assisted checks as just nice to have. They are just as important, in many cases even more important than the automated checks. And often you can't do that for your entire website because of resources, but then go back to the idea about thinking what are the most important user flows or user journeys on our website, and make sure you do these manual or assisted checks at least on your most important sites on your website.
Thank you. Cool. So just going to move to a theme that rose during the roundtable, but also with the questions that came through from everyone that registered. And that is that universities generally know what improvements their websites needs, but it's internal barriers that often slows down or stops progress. So given internal barriers like slow decision-making, unclear ownership, complex governance structures, competing priorities, and budget pressures, just a small list, what are the most effective ways to build momentum and secure leadership buy-in and also do all that without having to do a website rebuild.
So I would say with us, typically we approach things by, first of all, doing some stakeholder mapping, trying to find out who are the kind of key individuals we need to speak to across the organization. Can't speak to everyone, obviously, but just getting the right people in the room, running a sort of impact effort matrix sort of session. What are all the initiatives we've got in flight at the moment? What potential initiatives are there that could have an impact on the site? These could be small things, could be big things, but we'll sort of narrow into stuff that's going to be good bang for buck. So can we get something that's actually going to be really high impact, but actually quite cost effective? And we've had some instances recently where that's really worked out very well. And then it's just a matter of building up a backlog of these little projects. As we're getting stakeholder buy-in for new improvements, sketching ideation workshops followed by rapid prototyping, getting something that people can see, because I think certainly as someone with a design background, you can see the solution in your head, but not everyone can. And so just really kind of honing it down, putting it in someone's hands, and ideally, to do a bit of guerrilla research, some sort of cost-effective a bit of validation, could be with students, could be with whatever the interested stakeholders are, and sort of bringing those two things in tandem. So you've got something that's kind of functional, interactive. You can see how it functions. You have validation. And then you can build up a little kind of a little business case that way. But it depends on the particular organization and its dynamics and its kind of culture. And I know with universities, some of them have got cultures that are centuries old, sometimes running, many centuries back. So yeah, it's just navigating all those sorts of complexities. But yeah, typically that's very much, for us, for Amica, that's very much front of mind when it comes to sort of making these sort of tangible, having a tangible impact without having to completely scrap it and start from scratch. I don't know if you want to add to that, Gustav.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think just from our own experience working with HE institutions, just setting up a clear project charter, laying out your objectives right at the beginning, thinking about KPIs. So maybe you're looking for a 0.5 or a 1% uplift on postgraduate application versus a smaller or large uplift in undergraduate application to your university. Whatever the KPI might be, I think it's just putting together a really succinct and clear project charter, those KPIs, that gives stakeholders a reason to buy into actually attending these initial workshops and discovery sessions. I also think of it from the other side, so not just experience, but from the technology side. So all of our different universities here in the UK have a very diverse set of systems and technologies and business processes that's keeping that engine humming. And knowing how to integrate into your CRM system or into your bespoke custom databases or your student management platform or your course management system, there's so many, there's arguably hundreds of different systems you have to think about. So I think it's really important to have in your project charter not only the clear KPIs, but also talk about the impact and the output and what good looks like. What would a good future look like? And hopefully that gives a reason for people from different parts of the stakeholder landscape, from the business to the finance side of the institution, to the marketing teams who care about the experience, to the technical IT teams who have to run all the systems and platforms. They all come to the table together to work in unison to deliver this project and the output that it's seeking.
And what lessons can higher education learn from online retail?
Oh, blimey, that's a great question. Maybe I'll start with that one. I mean, there's so much, right? So I think let me pick a few. So making it easy to find information first, right? You go to any shop online, and you're looking for an item or a price, you're looking for reviews or delivery information, a lot of retailers who care about that really optimize for that. So they make it really easy to find key information. So if universities can copy this by laying out course information in a clear way, what the course covers, who it suits, entry needs, costs, outcomes, etc. That's a great example. Using social proof is another one, right? So retail sites lean really heavily on reviews, ratings, and user photos and videos and so on. Just look at Amazon, for example. So, universities can could potentially use more real student stories of short clips, the honest, what's it really like type of content that feels more natural rather than corporate. I think sort of fast paths to action, right? In retail, they really optimize on as few clicks as possible. What if universities could really take those strides and those steps to making their content a lot more readily available? So when the student or the parents perhaps are seeking answers to questions, it's very easy to book that open day with as few clicks as possible and so on. Personalized nudges, there's another great example from retail, right? So online shops give prompts based on what you've been looking at. So what if universities could do the same, right? Send course guides based on subjects viewed, or invite users to events that match their interests, or show you might also like type of links to related content, course content, and so on the website. Gosh, I could just go on and on for the next half an hour talking about this, but I won't. Jamie, Connie, Lars, anything from you?
I would maybe have a more of a contrarian kind of take on that. So those are all good things, but there's also things that what you're kind of, quote unquote, selling is very different for a university than it is to buying a mattress or buying a set of headphones. You're selling you're selling someone's imagination of their own future. And it's such a big thing, it's such a big considered purchase. And I think some of the techniques not to latch onto from retail are the kind of more hard sell techniques and try to really kind of nudge them to apply to stuff. But I think it's more of it needs to be more of it's a much more considered purchase because it's really big, it's really emotional. It's it's giving them the right information at the right moment, which is a non-trivial problem to solve because they're very complex products. So yeah, that'll be me. I don't know, Connie, Lars?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that retail e-commerce are very strong on accessibility, but I think the ones that they are seeing returns on that investment. So the one that comes to mind is TUI, the holiday company, and since they started investing in their accessibility practices by improving their website and allowing users with accessibility needs to be able to book and plan in a more efficient, like an accessible way through their websites, and created accessible guides about the amenities and everything that's included in their hotels, and even like added videos from their accessibility ambassadors on their websites. They have seen an increase of 125% of bookings from 2019, so that's pre-pandemic, to 2025, and they are seeing returns, as I said. So I feel that is maybe a demographic that's perhaps a little bit overlooked, because it's always framed a little bit as if it's a moral obligation, but at TUI, at least, what they say is that it makes commercial sense, and I do agree with that. So I think it is important to invest in accessibility because it's a valid audience that is interested in going to university and investing in that. Yeah, Lars.
Yeah, if I can add something to it, there may not necessarily be that much positive in retail around accessibility, or in other words, in my experience, actually universities and also public sector organizations are probably in many cases a little bit ahead of the more like retail businesses when it comes to accessibility. But one thing I was thinking about here is there's research showing that 69% of people with disabilities they will turn away from online retail shops that aren't accessible. They will simply go and look for different place. And I think that same thing could be true. I mean, it's not the same going to buy a pair of shoes and finding your the place to study for the next many years. But still, I think the signal you are sending when you give a positive or negative accessible experience to your audience, that can be very strong, even though there may not even be that kind of relationship. I would think if I came to sign up or to apply for a course at a university as a blind person, and if I saw I'm not even able to apply here, I would definitely be worried about what will the rest of the experience be like afterwards for the coming years. I'm with that university, and I mean, then there may not be that connection, but I would be worried if I don't get an accessible experience right from the beginning there.
What was the metaphor that we heard in our roundtable? The curb notches. Was it curb notches?
What was it, Connie?
Curb cut. So
cut.
those dips in the sidewalks that are typically created for wheelchair users, but are indeed helping other people who maybe have luggage or who are maybe pushing a pram. So accessibility is actually creating better experiences for everyone. So it's definitely something to consider, in higher education.
Cool. And then I'm going to end, this will be the final question, and it's going to sound super simple, but I have a feeling that you'll all have a different take on this and can debate about it for hours. But just looking back to a little bit AI-esque, chatbot versus human, which do you think prospective students prefer on a website?
Oh, there's multiple ways to answer that question. It depends what type of chatbot you're talking about. If you're talking a 2014 era chatbot, I think every time we see testing with them, well, nobody likes them. I think chatting with a human via which medium, I suppose, younger generations, they prefer text. I heard a phrase recently, was it telephobia or something? That they have a fear of, especially around clearing, talking to someone on the phone. It's like it's an anxiety inducing thing. So yes, chatting to a human, but via a kind of something more like WhatsApp,
a live chat.
Yeah, more like a live chat, but certainly not a kind of 2014 bot. Somewhere in between, something that could be facilitated with AI. Yeah, what's your thoughts, Christoph?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on the ball there. Definitely a live chat with a real person is something that is worth considering. But I think that also is quite costly as well. It can also become frustrating because if as a university you can only afford to have 5 or 10 people or agents online to field all that barrage of questions during clearing, then the queue gets longer and longer, and the period of time it takes to answer those questions also starts to slow down. So, I think that there are now the new age, the new era chatbots that are based on large language models, like the ones that are from OpenAI and others. They're really now capable of having a natural conversation with you, and also have a tone of voice applied to them as well. So if your institution has a particular tone of voice, it talks about itself using certain phrasing, terminology, the chatbots can use that. It can learn it, can emulate it. It can also hoover up all of your course information, all of your departmental information, and everything else, and incorporate it with a personality into the response. And it's not just a ask a question, get an answer. It's a two-way ongoing conversation like you would have with a ChatGPT interaction. So I think moving away from 2014 style dumb chatbots that are just going through a decision tree through to modern era large language based chatbots, there's a complete revolution happening there. And I think a lot of universities would benefit from looking at some of those solutions.
Yeah, and I suppose I agree with both. I think it's an emotional time. So human connection at that point for students might might make a significant difference and might indeed determine the course and the university that they choose. So I feel that this cannot be replaced, but realistically and being pragmatic, I do understand that there are business constraints and there are limitations in terms of budget. So I think this is a good middle ground, having an AI chatbot that has a specific tone of voice. I think things like that help, and having a natural conversation, of course, does too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that all sort of accelerates during clearing, because they need to know if courses do have available spaces as well. So there need to be all sorts of integrations there, I presume.
Yep. Yeah, it's also an opportunity to rapidly build a marketable database as well, because if the first interaction with the chatbot is, hey, can you give us your first name and email address? In case the connection drops, we can get back to you or send you an email follow-up. That's an entry into potentially building a opted-in database of potential would-be future students to market to through the funnel.
I just want to add to it. So, and at first I want to say, actually, I really like the new chatbots, the AI powered ones, where in many cases they actually do give pretty good answers. But again, back to what we've talked about earlier on, if that is the way of communication you choose, it's very, very important that you make sure that the user interface for that one is actually accessible. In many cases, these are maybe components, third-party components you go out and buy and put on your website. And that's exactly one of the very important points in time where you want to make sure that you actually go and test, is this interface for this new smart chatbot actually accessible so it can be used by everyone.
Makes a lot of sense.
Good point.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. Unfortunately, I am going to have to end it there. Otherwise, I fear we will go well over time. I am very sorry for those of you whose questions didn't get answered, but there's some ways that you can continue the conversation with us on the screen. If you do want to have a chat with one of us one-on-one at Invika, please do get in touch with us via getinTouch@invika.com. If you're interested to learn a little bit more about Acquia and the web governance tool, there's a QR code on the screen there to get a free website audit. For those of you who haven't got their phone out, I will be sending all of this information out via email, so don't stress if you don't jot this all down right now. So I guess final thing to say is thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to Connie, Christoph, Jamie and Lars for sharing all your amazing expertise and insights. And I hope you all have an amazing afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.